Good morning, everyone. This is week 10 of facility design. And then today, what we're going to be talking about is design and color psychology, as well as a little bit of branding psychology. So where we left off last week was on week 8. I gave you a fairly introductory view of the front of house design aspects and some of the things that we'd be looking at as designing great spaces for people in which to dine in. We looked at some of the regulatory information as well as and looked at some pictures and just kind of some overhead layouts of how these things can be created. What I want to go over today is that is only one part of how you develop places where people feel comfortable eating and spending some of their time. Much has to do with also how the senses affect how we view these spaces and how these spaces affect us. Color schemes. In many of the situations or instances that we have, specifically being in healthcare, long-term care, retirement homes, mental health wards, color, feel, psychology, all of these things have a huge impact on how our guest or our resident will feel. So we're going to go through. I'm having some troubles with my recording software, so I hope everyone can hear me. We will only know at the end. First thing is that we will be going, let me move this up here. We will be going through these 5 different ideas. Let me get rid of my gum. They are servicescapes. So this is how the senses guide design. Colors, the impact of colors on guests, lighting, the flow of materials and personnel, which we have covered before, but I really want to keep talking about this because it really has a huge impact on how you do your layouts. And then human workspaces. So designing is a place where you want to work. And the very first idea of servicescapes is how the physical surroundings impact the customers and employees. So this could be ambient scents. This could be background music. If there's a classical music playing with roasted oregano or thyme, this is a more pleasing experience. This could be the psychological reaction to the physical. So when you sit down in a comfortable chair versus a hard, cold metal one. These things can influence the length of stay and how you feel about the location. And as you can see here, I'll keep bringing in all these different pictures to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. The use of different physical items. You see in the bottom right-hand corner these big, comfortable chairs, this big, thick oak wooden tables. Beautiful lighting. It looks comfortable. It looks intimate. And this is kind of the same restaurant that we're looking at here. So how we break down these senses are into the 5 different ones. First one is personal space. So according to Edward Hall, our perception of space is a direct relation to our comfort level. There's no different. This is no different in facility design. It's very similar. And this does have a culture bias. So as an example, if you grew up in Tokyo, let's say in a very urban, 30, 40 million people within, 100 kilometers of each other, your sense of space and having other people in what you would call your bubble is probably a little bit, less defined versus someone here that grew up in Canada in a fairly rural area and smaller towns. Having people really close to you might be something that you're uncomfortable with. Many of you are from India, so you have a higher population, so maybe this doesn't exactly apply perfectly to you. But even still, we don't want people very, very close to us that we don't know. So as you see here, the very first one is public space. This is 12 feet plus. And essentially what we consider this is there's no ownership of space. If I sit down, I don't own the 12 feet around me. And if someone sits down in a table 10 feet away, they can do that. There's no ownership of space at all. The next is social space. So 4 to 12 feet. This space can be owned by several different groups or parties. So you can have 2 or 3 tables within 12 feet of each other, all talking amongst themselves, and not really an issue. There's no, you don't feel like somebody is encroaching on your space or you feel awkward about that. Next one is personal space. So this is basically 18 inches. So when you think 18 inches, it's within your arm reach. It's, your arm is usually about 2.5 feet. So it's personal space, 18 inches to 4 feet. So this is direct ownership. In food and beverage, this is typically our table. So we own that table. If a stranger were to come and sit at the table that you're sitting at, you would kind of feel strange about it. For food and beverage, it's a little bit different. If somebody came and sat beside you on the subway, sure. But even still, if they're touching you or rubbing up against you, you might still feel a little invaded in your space. So for food and beverage, 18 inches to 4 feet is direct ownership. We reserve this for friends and family. And then your intimate space is 0 inches. So someone actually like touching you, to 18 inches, which is we're generally uncomfortable to have anyone that's an unknown in this space. So think about this as well when you do washroom design. You don't want to be 18 inches, which is 1.5 feet away from the nearest person beside you at a urinal, in a stall, at a sink. You want to give them a little bit more space. This is something here where when you think personal space, all of these tables might be within 12 feet of each other, but they all have their own ownership. And then this is like your 4-foot social space where you only want your close friends and families in. Auditory space. So often what we hear has a big impact on how we feel, right? So if you are sitting in an office like this with these horrible lights and all I hear is like the HVAC system kind of humming, and it's just not a great, I always put music on in the background. I just work better. I feel better. So primary audio is up to 20 feet. So primary audio means that you hear that over anything else. So someone speaking at your table, me in a classroom talking to my students, that's the primary audio. Background audio is something 20 to 100 feet. Basically means that it is no longer something that you hear first. Rather, you'll hear your own breathing, what you're doing, everything else, and the background audio, and that's what most places should have, is something just it's like white noise, right? As they say, it's something to have in the background, and it's nice and soothing. And if you've ever been to a restaurant where no music was playing, you know what I'm talking about, because you hear the clanking of knives and forks and cups and glasses, and it's kind of strange. There's nothing else to kind of distract you from all the actual noise of jobs getting done. We do manipulate this a little bit. So acoustics really are affected by fabrics and carpet and stuff like that. So if you're in a stairwell, you know the acoustics are great because your noise is bouncing off all these concrete walls, and it sounds amazing if you're a great singer, but you can hear people from a long ways away. We don't want that in a restaurant. So you see carpet, you see fabrics on walls or carpets on walls even. Floors, they even put things like this right here. So if you're looking at where my mouse is, it's showing these little boxes, I guess. These are rectangles up on the wall. This is actually not anything technological. It's literally a little wooden frame, and they wrap in fabric and they put them up. They match the paint with the wall, and this just absorbs some of all the noise, so it doesn't bounce off these walls and reverberate, because it could be a very loud area. Olfactory space is basically how we smell things and the effect the smells have on our body. So aromas can be manipulated using aroma infusers and ventilation. You will see this often. There are certain smells that result in different emotions or reactions, and casinos know this, real estate agents know this. Casinos now actually have scent-emitting slot machines that usually send out smells of vanilla and things like that to relax people and have them stay longer. Real estate agents will go into a home, and if you walk into a home that you might want to buy and it doesn't smell nice, then often people will walk away and say that there's mold or there's rot or there's dirt or there's grime, there's something I don't like here. So what they'll do is they'll bake cookies, they'll put a bunch of cinnamon on apples and just put them in the oven, put it on really low, but the smell that it gives throughout the whole afternoon is great. They'll light candles, they'll use cleaners, stuff like that. In the food and beverage industry, when we're thinking about our kitchens, we want to ensure our smells stay in the kitchen, because often what we have are things like we're baking off lots of garlic, right? So if you do something like that, it's an overpowering smell. You're sauteing a lot of onions. It's great when it comes out on a plate in a finished product in the right amount that it should be. But, you're baking 7 trays of garlics. You don't want that smell going all through your entire restaurant. So what we do is positive and negative air pressure. So if any of you in the healthcare industry, you already know all about this. You will have specific rooms that are built with not positive and or negative air pressure for either people with a very highly communicable disease, or if they're immunosuppressant or immuno endangered, I guess you want to call it, where they cannot be susceptible to outside illnesses. So when you have, as an example, when you have a negative air pressure in a room right here, that means that air from outside, and it could be a hallway, it could be actually outside, it could be another room, will push into the room. Okay, so that's okay if you have, let's say you have COVID-19. So you want negative air pressure in this room. So when this door opens up, the air in the hallway will go in. The air that could have COVID particles or something in the air will not go out. Otherwise, on the other side, positive air pressure. So this is what you'd want your kitchen, negative air pressure. So in the dining room, when you open your doors to the dining room air goes into the kitchen, not the kitchen air going out into the dining room. Positive air pressure is great for those who are trying to stay away from a disease. Like my mother, she's immunocompromised. If she gets sick, it's usually a little bit worse. So she would want be in a hospital in a positive pressure room where the air that she has is sent out to the hallway, but nothing that's potentially in that hallway can come into the room. So gives you an idea how that would work. Dining rooms should be positive air pressure because when the door to outside opens up, and that's usually what it's attached to the dining room, the cold air from outside does not come into the restaurant. Rather, the warm air from inside the restaurant pushes out. So that's what stops you from getting drafts. That stops you from getting cold air. And it's easier to push hot air out than it is to try to warm up the cold air that comes in. So give you an idea of how that works and how it can really affect smells. Next one is tactile or kinesthetic. So this is just what we touch. And I have a dog toy for some reason. So how we touch things that are feel about them. If you ever have like a really crappy Bic pen, which is kind of like this, or you get like a really nice heavy ballpoint pen and you just have a nicer feel. It's more luxurious. Same thing with cutlery. A really thin piece of cutlery that you can bend that you would get at a dollar store versus a nice thick chunky one. There's a different feel to it. So here you'll see both what we consider a cold. Now this is very modern looking. It's stainless steels, it's blacks, it's grays, it's whites, but it's cold, 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 right? You don't feel warm in here. Everything that you touch is not living versus sitting in this where it has this nice wood wall, wood finishes, nice comfortable leather. So a lot of this came from living animals and things, plants and animals. And again, it gives you a different feel. Having nice thick cutlery, that kind of stuff. It's all a little bit different about the tactile space and how we touch and move things. Thermal space is the next one. So hot rooms feel more crowded, wait times seem longer, and people can become more irritated more quickly. Whereas cold rooms are more uncomfortable. It really affects the younger and colder generations the most, and it doesn't entice diners to stay longer. You're never going to get this perfect. Some people just run hotter. Like I'm probably sweating right now. I just run hot. And then some people are generally just cold. So it's one of those things that you just try to work with in the best way you can. When you think about outdoor spaces like patios, ensuring that you have shade protection, pergolas, umbrellas, misters even. When you think about the kitchen and in the state that your employees and yourself need to work in, air-conditioned kitchens are actually a really good idea. They cost a lot of money, but so do employees. So that's the kind of thing. Am I willing to spend $5 or $10 extra a day on ensuring that my kitchens are air-conditioned they'll always be hot, but better. But I'll have happy employees. And if I spend $10 a day, $300 a month, that's better than trying to hire a new employee that month and train them up because they're not happy. So it's those kind of things you need to think about. Next thing is color. So how does color affect moods and design? So a couple different things. They can emphasize different feelings, thoughts, behaviors. Light and cool colors we use these generally in design in small and narrow spaces. So if you were to go into a hallway that's fairly narrow and paint it black or brown or dark blue, it now feels like it's receding, like it's smaller. So light and cool colors, that it's narrowing in. Light and cool colors open it up a little bit. So if you have light, neutral tones, usually makes a space feel nice and a little bit larger than it actually is. When you have really big spaces and you still want to have some sort of intimacy, you can use dark and warmer colors, and that will happen. That will basically bring in that area so it's a little bit not so large. Bold colors increase turnover or encourage turnover. So lunch, breakfast joints, places that you're trying to move people quickly, cafeterias, all of these work very well to try to get them in, get them fed, and get them out. And in many of the places that we will work, that's kind of the idea. Like, we're not here to maybe necessarily have really high average checks and have them sitting for 3 hours. Rather, they are our workforce. We work at a prison. We work at a hospital. We work, in a non-commercial setting. So we work in an institution. They're coming down to eat so then they get back to work. Bold colors will work then. Subtle colors do the opposite. They create that calm. They do not instill any kind of any kind of thought of trying to, like, hey, I have to eat quick, I have to get going, any kind of urgency. So here's a couple different things that we talk about. So for your major project, often what we do when we think about how we're going to design a layout or a restaurant, and how we might want to bring in colors, is that we pick a couple. So you want to have a brand. You want a primary color or one or two. You want maybe a couple secondary. Most good branding packages also pull in imagery, fonts, all these kind of things. What you'll be doing for your major project coming up, which will be described if you haven't already had me in class when you're watching this, basically we'll go through all of that and talk about, okay, not only were you designing a layout, but it's not just a layout. It needs to have a feeling to it. It has to have a theme or a concept. And colors is one of the ways that we do that. So you'll see a lot of diners with a lot of red color. They're high action, they're high energy. You might go to the, the Rec Room, which is the new Cineplex, the movie theater. The Rec Room is like all the games, so they have like little restaurants. And you might see a lot of red and high colors. Whereas yellow is a friendly, happiness, optimism. Waiting rooms in hospitals are like very muted yellows and very muted blues because they are calm and relaxed, and that's kind of the color schemes that we're going for. So there's different things that we want to work with. As an example of branding, when you think about branding and you say, hey, I'm going to redesign the GDR, but I want a different idea or a different brand to it, you can look at this. So Georgian College has their own brand. They have blue, green, and white, and those are basically their three main, maybe black, but really you see these more than often. They also have some secondary, tertiary colors. So it's this orange, which you don't see too often, but it does exist. This is kind of their branding package. Their primary palette, their secondary palette, and their tertiary or their third palette, and then the different fonts that they use. So all their marketing, all their ads, if they were a restaurant, all their menus, their plateware, their seating, their bar tops, all this would follow this branding package. Now, you don't need to create a full branding package for the GDR design, but you have to keep these things in mind when you are doing it. So I think at the very least, you come up with a color scheme that matches your theme or concept you want to come up with. What kind of restaurant do you think Georgian College dining room will be. And there's a little bit more information here about marketing, but we don't need to get into that too much. When we talk about lighting, so lighting is interesting because lighting has been said that it's the most important design aspect, because what it does is it influences and emphasizes everything you've already done, which is kind of neat to think about it that way. When we talk about lighting, we talk about things called foot candles. So a foot candle is the amount of light inside 1 square foot sphere. So think of a light in the middle of a balloon, let's say, and that's what we call foot candles. So that's how they measure foot candles. So if you stare directly into the sun, it's 10,000 foot candles. Overcast day might be 100. We like to use in the restaurants as much as possible natural light because it's free and it's good for people. Now, we don't always have that. Sometimes our restaurants our dining areas or dining rooms are literally locked in by 4 walls. So then we have to bring in our own light. And how we look at it is a little bit different from front of house and back of house. So give you an idea, fine dining, which is low light, we have usually 15 to 20, right? So it's very intimate. You can't see much. Your eyes will eventually adjust. Fine dining doesn't really go well with long-term care retirement home dining because they need to see. So you would go up to 40 or 50, probably for that fast service cafeteria style. Walkways and storerooms in commercial restaurants, we're also trying not to light up too much. Kitchens are usually 30 to 40. And then where we do the reading recipes, weighing, measuring, checking, and record keeping, all the stuff you need lots of light to do, it's anywhere from 70 to 150. And 150 is actually quite bright. You also have to keep in mind the reflective nature of some of the items. So mirrors, glass, stainless steel, these all reflect. And then we like to have indirect lighting in our front of house areas as much, and in the back of house more direct. So this gives you an idea of the indirect lighting, where you can see all this different lighting that you see on the walls here. They're pointing down, they're pointing up, they're pointing against the wall. This chandelier is just streaming to left and right, but not really shining down. These candles don't do much. So no one's getting glare in their eyes, but it gives a really nice glow. Again, intimate lighting, very dark when you're sitting in these booths, but once you're in there and you're eating and you're relaxed, it's so very enjoyable. This is the way how they use their outdoor lighting this is an indoor patio. It's just a broom, but they made it look like a patio and with some live trees or fake trees, potentially this fake kind of shrub that they put up, different wood elements, patio lanterns or patio lights, and now all of a sudden this indoor restaurant looks like it's outdoors. And here's some other ways that they have lit some stuff up. So they put it up in the ceiling. Now, because they have all kinds of stainless steel and piping and all kinds of stuff going on, they have put up these light shields, basically just so it's not staring them directly in the face, the customers. These are just a couple layouts of some famous sitcoms. So if you ever watched Seinfeld, which I don't know if you have, but this is the layout of Seinfeld, his 1-bedroom apartment. And this is the layout of, what's it called? Big Bang Theory. So Sheldon and Leonard and everyone else and all that stuff. I think it's just kind of cool. But you'll see, so now we have layouts where we can start applying some color. And we can do that with Visio quite easily. You've done it already with your flooring, which is great. But now you can also do it with some of your bedding and things like that. So when we do our front of house designs, you might want to do it with your bar tops and your tabletops. A few of the things that we'll speak about, which much of this is we've already touched upon. I'm just going to go a little bit farther into it to give you an idea of what they'll look like, because you will need to know this information. So one is the flow of the 3 major flows, which is employees from one area to another, raw food, and dishes. Now, we've already talked about this. We've looked through this particular thing when you did your back of house design assignment. Now, many of you did not do well with this. I think you don't quite understand some of the main parts of the kitchen and how they must be set up. And there's a million different layouts, I suppose, but they all have some things very in common, which we will go through in class. as far as what do hot lines and cold lines and dishwashing areas look like, and where do they need to be in relation to the entrance into the kitchen. The rest of the stuff you can kind of rearrange and move and kind of place where you want. But those 3 main or 4 areas, hot line, cold line, dishwasher, and maybe a service area, are really important. When we think of movement flows, so I'm just looking at this one here and I say, okay, well, if I'm a customer or guest, when I walk in the door, I'm going to go to this little host area. I will walk around. I might go up to the bar. I might go take a seat. I might go up and go to the washer. That's more or less the flow of that particular person. Now, service staff, so this is just the service staff will be in here. They could be in the back in the kitchen a little bit, just picking up their food, maybe in the storage. They're in their service little area. That's actually, so this particular one's out in the dining room, which sometimes there are. It's tucked around this wall, so that's not bad. They're walking over here to the service area for their bars. All bars need to have a service area where drinks go, not for the ones that's sitting at the bar, but for the going out to the tables. And then they also walk through all these tables and drop food off and so on and so forth. What you would want to do as someone who's doing design is look for areas, look for sight lines, that could be area issues, and lines of congestion. So what we're looking for is that when I see this, I say, okay, the service area here makes no sense. It should be right here because that's already there. We would be able to essentially get rid of all of this purple line because they will never have to come here. And if I'm a host and I'm walking the server to the bar or to the guest to the bar, there's going to be some congestion. I could bump into people. People are drinking here. You just got to be careful. So a quick redesign is moving this up here and put another stool down there. Easy peasy. Sight lines is something you need to worry about as well. So if you were looking at this, if you're sitting at this particular chair right here, you would be able to see into the service area. Or if you're sitting at maybe this one right here, you can probably see into the kitchen. You can see the service area. A couple of these also have sight lines kind of into the bathroom door area. All of these, sometimes they're not fixable. Sometimes they are. So it's just something you need to be wary about and aware that you can see if you sit here right into the kitchen, and you might see dirt, grime, swearing, hear the guys singing, whatever happens in a kitchen, which is why having a service area in this spot and moving a couple tables down there makes much more sense. And then you would do that for a larger restaurant like this, and you would probably come up with a lot more different areas where all of a sudden there's some congestion. There's people running into each other. There's a wall where you're walking around and you don't notice someone else is coming. So these are things we just have to be careful of. And the people that do it best is IKEA. So this is IKEA, and they have a wonderful way in which that they make every single customer walk through every single area in their whole entire showroom floor, and then go down to the basement and order their stuff and then eat there as well. They have a great idea. Think about if you had to go to a Walmart and they made you walk through every single aisle before you're able to go buy something. You wouldn't go. But IKEA has figured out a good way of doing it. And cheap food gets people into IKEA as well. A few different design principles, which I think we've gone over a little bit, but ease of sanitation. So when you are building things or when you are choosing how to build things, ensuring that things can be cleaned easily is often the best way to ensure that they are actually done. If something is easy, people will do it. If something is difficult, some people will not do it. Some employees don't want to do it. So having the right finishes on walls so they're easily wiped, providing and arranging work areas that cross-contamination is unlikely is good, using wall-hung equipment, keeping floors free of clutter, and having garbage disposal and prep areas and garbages on wheels and things like that so you can easily move around the garbage. That's all fantastic. Supervision, of course, is very important. So we want to make sure that we are able to supervise the areas in which we design. So this could be the office with lines of sight to the prep areas. This could be minimizing the number of walls, using half walls where necessary, and also maybe try to avoid separating areas by floor. Small offices are always required. For your major assignment, you will not need to put a small office in there. But as you can see, this 8-foot by 8-foot small office worked perfectly. And then just as I was going through some of these design principles, again, I think I've touched on a couple of these. We know that space efficiency is important. We don't want it too large because that's wasting steps, but nor do we want it too small because it causes crowded injury and cross-contamination. So somewhere right in between is ideal. But as you can see, in Canada, the square foot per employee in their work area keeps diminishing. So we're at in 2018, we're at 145. This actually probably went back up a little bit during our pandemic years, only because we're trying to stay away from people, but probably not a whole lot. So we did go through some of this here as far as like how much room you need in between the tables. I will go through this briefly and then I'll finish this up. So human engineering for this is for aisle space. So we looked at a little bit in the kitchen as far as what you need. This also really helps when you're looking at the minimum space between the inside of tables and making the travel spaces. So this is 30 inches between each table. It will be 43 or 44 inches if there has to be a wheelchair. So you want to make sure there's at least one hallway or one travel corridor with a 44 inch. Otherwise 30 is okay. And it gives you an idea of how these people are sitting here. So lots of different information right here as far as what you can use with different aisles, as well as different work surface heights. Now we've talked about storage. This just goes into storage a little bit more, how you would want to design your walk-in fridges, your dry storage, your freezers, why it's important, and a little bit more into employee locker rooms and toilets. Again, for your major assignment, no washrooms or offices will be required. All you'll be looking for, or employee locker rooms, all we're looking for is the actual operational areas in a commercial services restaurant. Okay, so assume the offices, the toilets, and everything else are out of it. Two things that I will bring up because it will be talked about is that server stands. So server stands are based on the food service concept. You will be required to develop 2 of them in your major project and probably 2 of them in your last in-class assignment. These will have to be close to the dining area, and we place them strategically so you save steps. So the server or the food service worker will save steps on how they move around. And as you can see, they have small amounts of just about everything that you could potentially need in the restaurant. And then the last one is your service area and bar. So if the kitchen is the heart of the house, the bar is the brain. So the bar is where a lot of stuff happens. It's where the phones are always answered. It's where all the takeout orders are taken. It's all where all the servers go to get their drinks. And it's really just kind of the main frame of the front of house. You know, if the hotline is that big area in the back of house where all the money's spent, the bar is that same thing for the front of the house. So it has to be close to the kitchen. It has to be close to the warewashing area. As you can see, there will be a top bar and a bottom bar. So the top bar basically just means that it's above this one. So this is a bottom bar, which is just all storage. They have a dishwasher. They have a little sink here. They have another sink there. Lots of glassware, some liquor storage, ice well, blender. I don't know what that is. More alcohol. But then you'll also have a bar on top of this covering some of this, but this is where also the guests will sit up at. So you'll have that top bar, which is mostly clear. It's just for guests to sit at and eat and drink and talk with you. And all this stuff is kind of hidden from their view. Then you will have a back bar. So this is something that's behind you against the wall. There might be TVs above all this stuff. There could be alcohol displays. There could be a tap tower, like a beer tower, some fridges and storage, maybe your point of sale system, whatever this is. Looks like an ice cream machine. Who knows? This is where all the things that you will need as well. Could be a daiquiri machine, actually. And then you'll have a service station somewhere incorporated in this whole bar area. And this is a small service station which has just all of your different garnishes, ice, glassware, sink, shaker tins, alcohol, so they can make a drink, they can put it up here. There's no stools that would be up here. Basically what would happen is that this is the area that they would use in which to make the drinks that are going out to other tables. So that's a good breakdown of some of the front of house area and why it's important, how the senses affect all of our feelings when we go for a meal, as well as how branding can play a role in this. So I'll leave that at that. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in class.